We have no idea where that came from. Somehow, when we transferred it from one computer to another, we got that wonderful little thing there. We have no idea what it is or where it came from. So this gives you something to figure out if you like doing those kind of things. Okay, how many of you were at our last session? Our last session on the 4 pillars of emotional health. All right, good. Anything you took away from that was helpful? You'd like to just, was there anything? Yes. Redo. Redo?
Redo, I love that one.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Anything that was helpful that you remember from it? Really gives me a lot of confidence that I'm really helping you.
The leaning on each other.
The leaning on each other, understanding that we need to stand on our own 2 emotional feet. You know, that's relatively new to relationship counseling and coaching. In fact, that's only been introduced for maybe about 10 years ago. So when I was in graduate school, that concept did not exist. I don't have time to go into that whole thing, but that is a very, very powerful concept, learning to stand on our own emotional feet, and helps a lot of marriages. Okay, today we're going to talk about, we've got 3 things that we're going to do. Number 1, we're going to talk about how to receive validations and why we have difficulty receiving validations, as well as how we can't keep them. I'm sorry, my brain's not working really good. What keeps us from receiving them, what keeps us from getting them, and then we're going to talk about how to make deposits into each other. Extremely important in our relationship. So we're going to talk about how to take those and receive those deposits. And then in closing, we have a fabulous video for you from one of our clients. You often hear me talk about our clients. You rarely hear from our clients. But this is a couple that we worked with over a period of time whose marriage was done. I mean, they were so done. They hadn't been together in 10 months and had no intentions of going back together whatsoever. And then I'll let them tell you the rest of the story. But God did a miracle, and with the tools that they received going through our process, they were able to now be in a thriving marriage. And they'll tell you it's not the same marriage. See, that's the problem. We often try to take the way our marriage has been and try to make it better. What we really need is transformation. And particularly in marriges that are just toxic and unrepairable in their present state. So we'll talk more about that. So I got a couple of things here I want to show you. One of the things that we know, and we're Facebooking this, so I'm trying to remember to stay in the Facebook frame. One of the things that happens, or that we know, is it's supposed to happen in our developmental years. We're supposed to receive a bottom to our emotional bucket. So we have a couple of emotional buckets up here this morning. So I want you to visualize that you have one of these internalized. Hopefully it's not this size or this rigid, because that would be hurtful. But inside of us, we all have an emotional bucket. Now, we're born with it. It's a place where we receive validation. Thank you, buddy. It's the place where we receive validation, the place where we build our belief system. It's where we learn to hold on to ourself. It's where we learn to stand on our own two emotional feet. So we're born with this internal bucket. Now, here, every one of us, when we come into this world, this internal bucket does not have a bottom in it. It's bottomless. So the first thing that's supposed to happen in a perfect world is that our parents put a bottom into our emotional bucket. Now, if you had perfect parents, anybody have? Or if you had perfect parents and you were a perfect infant, that worked out wonderfully. But we all know that we come into this world in a fallen state. So we don't have perfection. Our parents were not perfect. And if they were, you weren't a perfect child. Because you came into the world without a bottom in your bucket. Now, the bottom that goes into the bucket is unconditional love. That's the bottom that goes into the bucket. Unconditional love. Now, as parents, we have about 2 years to put a bottom in the bucket. From birth to age 2. That's why we tell you, and early childhood educators will tell you, don't worry about spoiling a child before they're 2. Because you can't spoil them before they're 2. You give them unconditional love.
Amen.
That puts a bottom in their bucket. Unconditional love. It's like sliding the bottom into the bucket. Now, when they receive an affirmation, they're able to keep it. They got a place for it. They got a container for it. And when the affirmation, the love, understanding, acceptance, approval, all of those things go into the bucket, and they're able to retain those valuable affirmations. Now, at the best, our buckets have holes in them. Sometimes we get some of that unconditional love, sometimes we don't. What happens when we don't get the unconditional love and we get affirmations, acceptance, approval, validation, value, it doesn't stick. Because our bucket has what? Our bucket's got a hole in it. You got it. Okay. So, we get into adolescence, we get into adulthood, and we get into relationships. And one of the things that we generally want to experience, and it's valid for us to experience in a relationship, is to get validations. We look to our companions for validations. Now, this is different, a little different than what I talked about last time. It's not a dependent dependency, it is a interdependent. So the interdependent relationship, I look to Sharon for things, she looks to me for them, and we give those back and forth to each other. Now, if I have been validated, and I've got a container to put those in, and I got a lot of good stuff going on, and I have good beliefs, remember I said beliefs, not feelings, about who I am, and then I I have a time when I need a withdrawal. I need Sharon to trust me, and I need to have made these deposits into her. And if I've made these deposits into her and I need to make a withdrawal, I can make a withdrawal. I blew it. I know you probably don't think I ever do that. But I have an emotional bank account built up in her. If I don't have one, and I try to make a withdrawal, what happens? If you have a savings account or a checking account and you don't have any money in it, and you try to make a withdrawal, what happens? You get penalties, right? Because there's nothing there to draw from. Now, this is extremely important. It's not that she doesn't want to give it to me. She doesn't have it to give to me. You can't give what you don't have. Okay? But I can still try to get it from her. And the more I try to get it from her, the more frustrated I'm going to become, the more frustrated she's going to become. And now I'm going to get into the blame game and the accusing game. You don't love me. You don't care for me. You don't care about me. And we're going to get into this push and pull. And nothing is going to get resolved because there's no deposits being made. Okay. Now, one of the challenges we have in adulthood, how do we get a bottom in the bucket if it's supposed to be done before we're 2 years of age? And now we're grown adults, and we recognize that we don't have a bottom in our bucket. And so how do we get a bottom in our bucket? I'm going to tell you, first of all, what a secular psychologist would tell you, secular counselor, and then I'm going to tell you what I would tell you. Okay. First of all, we're going to tell you that it cannot be done externally. After 2 years of age, no one can put the bottom in your bucket. Secular psychologists would tell you, you have to put the bottom in your bucket. And I would agree with that because it is an internal job, not an external job. So here's what it looks like when we try to get that done externally. We run to people that will give us what we think we want. They validate us. They give us all kinds of assurances. We're not getting that from home, but we get it from somebody at work. Oh, they understand me. They get me. And so we think that is filling our bucket. But we still have a hole in our bucket. You can't keep it if you don't have a bottom in the bucket. So how do we do that? Well, the secular counselor is at a disadvantage because he's got to figure out how to tell you, an imperfect human being, how to put an unconditional bottom in your bucket. So they'll tell you that you've got to unconditionally love yourself. Now here's what that often begins to look like. It starts looking like selfishness. It starts looking like some other things. Word just slipped my brain. It'll come back around in a minute. My brain's got some holes in it too. But it starts looking like narcissism. We're just in love with ourselves. So that doesn't really work very well because it is an imperfect person trying to put unconditional love into our bucket. But as believers, we have an edge. Remember, I said it has to be done internally, right? Can't be done externally. But the God who lives in us wants to love us unconditionally.
Amen.
He wants to put a bottom in your bucket. He doesn't do it with all the external things that's out there. He does it by His Word inside of us. And us starting to believe about ourselves what God believes about us.
Amen. Amen.
That's how you start putting a bottom in your bucket. You quit telling God why He shouldn't love you, and you just let Him love you. You stop giving excuses of why God can't love you, and you just start letting His love pour into you. Your husband can't do that for you. Your wife can't do that for you. They can't fix you. They can make deposits into you, but they can't fix you. Okay? Now, I've seen this in my work. I've seen this come from both sides, husbands and wives, where one was trying to validate the other one, but the other one could not keep the validation. They said, "I love you," but it was just like putting things in a bottomless bucket. I love you. I'm going to love you forever. You're the love of my life. You are the most beautiful person. You are the most handsome man. You are everything to me. Keep pouring it in and pouring it. You can't do it enough because there's not a bottom in the bucket. So we think if we look better, I had a client that did this, $50,000 worth of plastic surgery. If I had a better nose, he would love me. I love the nose you had. If I had better breasts, he would love me. If I had a tummy tuck, he would love me. If I had my eyelids fixed, he would love me. So kept trying to figure out how to be loved, but it doesn't work.
That's right.
Because there's not a bottom in the bucket. Have we got that?
Yes.
Okay. So we tend to want to blame our partner that we don't have a bottom in our bucket. But if we start believing what the Word of God says about us, and we start listening to God's Word about who we are, rather than trying to get it externally, then we can start gaining validation and value in our bucket. So, and here's one of the things in a relationship. When we marry somebody, there's more to this than just a ceremony. When a man gives himself to his wife, and a wife gives herself to her husband, there's something very mystical that takes place. And the mysticism is that once that is done, the validations that I'm going to show you here in a moment don't work coming from anybody else. We don't receive them from anybody else. They seem artificial if we get them from somebody else. We want to hear them from the person to whom we have given ourselves to. And anybody else is a counterfeit to that, and it's never real. It never feels real to us. Okay? So putting a bottom in your bucket is your responsibility, and you can't do it by yourself. It can't be done externally, but the best and most effective way for it to be done is what? The Word, hearing what God says, and not only what God says, we got to start believing what God says.
Amen.
You got to believe it. See, we got all the reasons why God can't love us, but we got to start looking at the reasons God can love us.
Yes.
And there's only one reason God, well, maybe two, but they're the same. Two reasons God can love us. One is because He made us into His image and likeness. We are a reflection of Him. And secondly, because He redeemed us. So He's got every reason in the world to love us. Now, He's got every reason to love you, and He's got every reason to love your mate, by the way. Just want to throw that in. Even when they're not very lovable, He still loves them. Okay, any comments or questions about what I've said so far? Because I'm going to transition to the second part of this here in a moment. Okay, is that helpful? All right, anybody recognize any holes in your buckets? Okay, cool. God can heal that hole, and He can complete you. All right. So now we're going to look at some of the things, the deposits. Thank you. You can always tell the C personalities in the room. Thank you. All right. We're going to now look at how some very things that you can do to make deposits. So what I'm going to give you are what I call the 6 primary love needs of a woman and the 6 primary love needs of a man. Now, let me just quickly say, this doesn't mean that these are exclusive to male or female. The ones that I give you for a female can also be for part of the male, and vice versa. But the research has shown that these are the primary needs. Now, I've done this in I don't know how many different places, different cultures, down in South America, Africa, different cultures, and haven't had anybody argue with me yet. The research comes out of some stuff in the University of Colorado many, many years ago, and somebody that popularized most of that research was John Gray when he wrote the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. That was all out of some research in the University of Colorado. But this is some unpublished stuff. In fact, I don't know if this is even available anymore, what I'm going to share with you today. So we've adapted these so that you can see and be very intentional about making some deposits. And I want to give you a way to do that I think can be very beneficial to you. Okay. The first primary love need. First primary love need. Can't see long. Okay, here we are. First primary love need of a woman is to feel cared for. Now, let me quickly say, I realize, I know we live in 21st century, but I'm not talking about, and you can argue with me with this if you want, or say it's not true for you. You're the women in the room. But this doesn't mean that a woman is helpless. This doesn't mean that she can't take care of herself. It doesn't mean that she is weak. But there's a part of the feminine nature that loves and desires to feel cared for. Now, I've got some expanded definitions of these, and if you signed in today and we have your email address, We'll send you these definitions so that you can have the expanded one, but I don't have time to go through all of them today. But I'll give you a little bit of each one of them. Caring is more, demonstrating caring is more than an emotion. It's a willful act to communicate heartfelt concern for the well-being of one's mate. It is demonstrating that you care. You're actually honoring. You're demonstrating care. Now, that is different, can be different for every woman. And guys, here's the trick. You got to find out what makes her feel cared for. My wife, I had no clue. We had been married, and guys, ladies, we don't have a clue. If you're expecting us to have a clue, you're going to be disappointed, you're going to be frustrated. We don't have a clue. We think we do, but we don't. Of how a woman feels cared for. We've been married many years, lived right here in Phoenix. We were putting our house on the market that we had, going to sell it. I'm not a bed maker. I get up in the morning, I let her make the bed, and never even thought about making the bed, to be honest. Why do you think that's funny? But on this particular day, the house was going on the market. We knew realtors were going to be showing. Sharon left the house before I did. I got up. I know that it's important for her, for the house to look nice. So I'm thinking, okay, people might be coming in today. I'll make the bed. So I make the bed. I leave. I get back. Sharon's already home. I come in the door. She's got the biggest smile on her face. She greets me at the door, hugs me, kisses me. I'm thinking, we sold the house. That's what I thought was going on. We were celebrating. I said, what happened? Did we sell the house? She said, sell the house? It just went on the market today. I said, well, I know, but I'm confused. What happened? She said, I've never felt so loved. Now I'm really confused. Feeling loved because we put the house on the market. Feeling loved because I came home. I don't know what we're feeling loved about here. And I said, well, you're going to have to tell me. You made the bed. I'm shocked. I'm in total shock. I said, yeah, because we had people, shut up, Alan. Oh, dig a hole here. Don't say it's because you thought we had to stop mid-sentence. I said, okay, you got to tell me why making the bed makes you feel loved. She said, because you knew that I cared about how the house would look if people. Let me tell you, I am one of the best bed makers in the world today. I got a degree in bedology. I can make a bed. And every time I make the bed, that's been 20 years ago or more, every time I make a bed, I remember the look on her face of how much she loved feeling cared for. That was a deposit in the bucket. Every time I make the bed, and I make the bed light, sometimes I mess up the bed just so I can make the bed again. My point is, I'm putting a deposit into the bucket, into her emotional bucket. Now, I have to learn how she feels cared for. And she has to teach me how she feels cared for. She can't take for granted that I'm going to figure it out. She knows after 55 years, I still didn't figure it out unless she tells me. So she communicates to me when she feels cared for. Now for some other women, it might be something totally different. One couple I was working with, she felt cared for if he put the dishes in the dishwasher instead of the sink. He had no idea that made her feel cared for. Cost him a lot of money to see me to figure out to put the dishes in the dishwasher. But he's good today at putting dishes in the dishwasher. That's how she feels cared for. So guys, don't think you can figure it out. Gals, don't expect us to figure it out. There has to be communication. Okay, let's go to number 2. I got to get through these. I got a bunch of them to go through. The second one is understanding. When a man listens in a way that communicates empathy by showing compassion, patience, relatedness, or connectedness instead of indifference to her feelings, she feels heard and understood. One of the greatest needs in the research of a woman's life is to feel understood. Now, guys, we're not wired to naturally understand our wife's emotions. We're not wired that way. We're wired basically to get from point A to point B in a straight line. Just reason it out, rationale, and we go from, here's what that looks like. I don't have a board to draw it on. Here's what that looks like. Point A, straight line to the middle with a bubble, and then a straight line to B. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's how I'm going to get there. Straight line, go into my emotional cave. Think about it, think about it, think about it, think about it. Got it. Come out, announce the solution, and be there. Boom. Guys, your wives are not wired to solve problems that way. They're wired to solve problems by talking through them. If I had a board here, I'd draw you this, but I'll just draw it in the air. Here's what it looks like for a woman. Here's point A. Here's point B. She starts at point A. Well, follow the roller coaster until she gets to B. She looks at the solution of a problem the way she tries on her clothes. How does this look? How does this feel? Does this make me look fat? Never answer that question. Does this make my butt look big? Does this, and she's trying on her emotions. Now here's the deal. We guys, we're fixers. Why are you feeling that way? Why are you doing that? That's stupid for you to think that way. Why are you even saying that? That's ridiculous for you to say that. So we want to judge every emotional roller coaster experience that she's having. Now, one of two things will happen when a man does that to a woman. Because we're programmed to be fixers. I can fix that heartbeat. I can get from A to B quick. So when you interrupt her, what does she have to do? Start right back at the beginning. She has to start over. If you interrupt her enough times, she will just shut down. And then when you say what's wrong, she says nothing. Guys, when she says nothing, that means everything. Okay? But if she's not going to tell you because she don't want you fixing it. If a woman feels understood, she will fix her own emotional state. Ladies, would you agree with that?
Yes.
I was doing a pastor's conference in Honduras, goodness, 30 years ago. And I was doing that process, teaching that model. We had 200 couples there, so I meant 400 people. So I had 200 wives, 200 husbands. And I said, if a woman feels understood, she will fix her own problems. And 200 women spontaneously stood to their feet and began to applaud and cheer. I didn't know what had happened. I turned to my translator and I said, "What'd you say?" He said, "I said what you said." I said, "You said exactly." They're still cheering. We're trying to figure it out. I said, "You said exactly what I said." He said, "Yes. I made that statement to a group of couples in a conference in Africa. Same thing. The women started cheering. Somebody got it for the first time that if I can just stay with me long enough." So here's what I learned. We had an experience in our house where I got to apply this. I was in graduate school, supposed to be getting smart about marriage, and we had a little dog that we'd had for many years, 11, 12 years, and the dog, first time it ever, we opened the front door, a cat came by, first time it had ever run out of the house, ran out of the house, into the street, got hit by a car, and I went out, picked up the dog, took it to the vet, and my wife and 2 daughters, they were young teenagers at that time, they were at home waiting. So the vet told me, well, let's put the dog down. So I'm in my A to B male fix-it mode. I'm thinking, how can I fix this? This is going to be terrible. They're going to be upset. I'm even thinking about swinging by the pet shop, picking up another dog. I'm thinking, no, that won't work. So I said, oh, well, I'm supposed to have learned something. So I came in the house. They were looking at me. They knew the look on my face, what the conclusion was, and I just nodded my head. And I sat down on the bed right beside all of them. We huddled up. They cried. I cried with them. They told stories about the dog. They laughed about stories. That little dog loved pizza, and if you left pizza in the trash can, she's going after the pizza. And we laughed about the pizza stories, and they cried some more. After a little while, 3 girls, my wife, 2 daughters, got up, brushed the tears out of their eyes, walked out of the room. Came back to me later, each one of them individually. Sharon said, "Thank you for loving us. That was awesome." My daughters came to me one at a time. "Dad, thank you for loving us. That was the best experience of your love we have ever had." I never said a word. I did nothing. I just rode the roller coaster and didn't tell them to get off of the roller coaster. I let them know it was okay to ride the roller coaster. And we just rode it together. Did I understand every emotion? Nope. I don't need to understand. I just need to ride the roller coaster. And they felt loved. Okay, we move on. Number 3. When a man shows respect to a woman, when a man responds to a woman in a way that acknowledges and prioritizes her rights, her wishes, and her needs, She feels respected, honored, and admired. So demonstrating respect, that's the stupidest idea I have ever heard. Now, I won't ask you guys if you've ever said that. I won't ask your wife if you've ever said that. But we tend to do that. We tend to disrespect. Here's one of the biggest ways I disrespected my wife and my two daughters when they were trying to tell me what was wrong with the car. Now, women's talk about cars and men's talk about cars is two totally different languages. Come in, the car's going womp, 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 womp. Oh, really? Where's it womping? And I'd mock them. Or the dimowachi underneath the thing isn't working correctly. These are actual words that came out of my girl's mouth. These are, the dimowachi under the thing is dangling. I don't know what to do about it. The dimowachi. We'll call the mechanic and ask him what the dimowachi is, because I have no idea. Disrespecting the way they try to tell a story using their language is disrespectful. A way to respect that is try to understand. I want you to show me what the dimowachi is. Now, they get to laughing about it after a while. They know they don't have the language to talk about what's wrong with the car, but they're trying to express it. I get the same problem when I'm trying to do something in the kitchen. I'm not a cook. I don't want to be a cook. My idea of cooking is the restaurant down the street, and I'll fix her a meal anytime she wants it at the restaurant down the street. I don't like cooking, don't want to cook. I've tried it a couple of times. I think the dumbest thing I ever did. I decided I was going to heat something up out of a can. Now, I know, not part of my education, so don't worry. But I thought if the pan was already hot, it would heat things up quicker. So I got the pan pretty warm. Whatever I was heating up, I poured in there. The pan had a convulsion. Literally. It just boom, and blew whatever I poured in all over me, all over the ceiling. It just literally blew it up. So I go in and try to tell Sharon, the pan had a convulsion. Now, that is as funny to her as me laughing at the dimowachi making a noise on the car. I don't have the language for the kitchen, she didn't have the language for the car, but we laugh about it. Of course, we laughed about it then, after we got the mess cleaned up, but just learning to respect rather than to make fun of it. All right, I'm telling you more personal stories than ever. Okay. Number 4 for a woman, devotion. There are many words that describe communication, devotion to a woman. But one of her sole needs is to know that her spouse is devoted. Now, guys, it's our responsibility to communicate devotion. The Bible talks about us being a covering to our wife. Here's where I think the most important application of that covering is helping her feel safe in the relationship. Demonstrating your attachment, your loyalty, your fidelity, your dedication, your commitment. Now, I have worked, and Sharon would tell you, very hard, many years, and still do, to demonstrate to her that I have eyes, feelings, love, attachment, loyalty to no one else but her. I don't expect 55 years of marriage for her to take that for granted. I want her to know that every day. Now, are there times that gets challenged? Absolutely. Times that wavers or feels like it wavers because we all have feelings. And so, but to continually communicate that is very important to demonstrate devotion. Now, when you demonstrate those things, I don't want to lose my visual here. When you demonstrate those things, you're making deposits into her emotional tank. Okay. Look at number 5. Validation. Women need to be validated. When a man does not object or argue with a woman's feelings and instead accepts and confirms their validity without trying to fix her, she truly feels loved. So validating her ideas, her thoughts, her feelings, her emotions. Validating doesn't necessarily mean that you agree. It means that you are validating that's how she is feeling. Now, I don't get a judgment about whether she should feel that way or shouldn't feel that way. That's not my role. My role is to understand that she's feeling that way. And not to tell her that she shouldn't feel that way. Ladies, does that ever work? No, of course not. When you try to tell somebody they shouldn't feel a particular way, and you can't logically argue your way out of a feeling. That's very important to know. You can't do it yourself, and you can't do it for your spouse. You can't logically, your emotional mind will not listen to logic about its experience. Once you validate the emotion, yes, this is how I'm feeling, and you recognize there may have been a trigger to that feeling, and I'm not always going to feel this way, but it's okay for me to feel this way. I gave you 2 words in our last session that can help you with this: compassion and curiosity. Why am I feeling this way? There's a reason for it. I don't have to be judging myself for it. Then you can take some of the power out of the emotion of it. But trying to logically argue your way out of it will not work. Trying to logically argue somebody else out of their emotional state doesn't work. But to acknowledge it, curiosity, compassion will help take the tension out of it and bring it to resolution. Is that helpful?
Yes.
All right. Number 6, reassurance. When a man repeatedly demonstrates his support, encouragement, care, understanding, respect, devotion to his wife, her feminine primary love need is fulfilled and her soul is nurtured. So when you do all those things, you are making huge deposits into her emotional tank. Now, you can walk into a room, and it's very easy to find people whose emotional tank is full. They glow. And women glow better than men, but they glow. Their emotional tank is full. Now, Ladies, I'll get back to the men here in a moment. If you have a hole in your bucket, doesn't matter how many deposits are made, they're not going to stay. And you're going to keep looking for the same thing over and over and over and over again. Okay. Questions or comments before I go to the men? Is this helpful? Or take a stand-up break and stretch a little bit? Let's do it. Stand up, stretch a little bit, greet somebody around you. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Well, one of the things I said is if a woman has a hole at the bottom of her bucket, she can't retain the deposits. Okay? And if a woman doesn't have any deposits, that becomes very evident as well. Okay. Yes.
You guys were referencing Facebook. Is this going to be on Facebook?
Uh-huh.
Would you tell us where to find it?
Yes, we will. Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, I know you can't debate an emotion, but sometimes, this is Steve, okay, I feel my wife is not thinking a good way. Like she's going a bad direction. Is that different or is that the same?
Would I dare answer for his wife? You want to respond or you want me to respond?
You respond. I've already used lots of words. So.
Okay. Okay. The first thing you said, Steve, is the key. I don't think she's going in the right direction. Okay. Giving attention to understanding where she's at, I think would be more powerful than trying to think if she's going in the wrong direction. Is that helpful to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because, you're weeding through, like you said, well, you got this, but I'm thinking our mind is actually more like spaghetti. And sometimes we go back to, before we go forward.
Sure.
So we're kind of like doing this
Yeah.
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, if you will, in my
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
So,
And here's the other. Let me tell you about ants. I shouldn't get into ants, but it's already popped out of my mouth. Now, this is not a negative thing. God did this. God made, because what made me think of it is when you said it's more like spaghetti and everything going crazy. Okay? ANTS is an acronym for automatic negative thoughts. Okay? God put it in a woman's brain for a reason. She has automatic negative thoughts. Now, it makes her more of a protector than we men are. We men are great providers, but we're not always great protectors. We think we are. Let me ask you a question. If you saw a 2-year-old, man and woman, saw a 2-year-old starting to run out into the street, what would be the first normal reaction of a man?
yeah.
First normal reaction of a man would be to holler, stop. What would be the first normal reaction of a woman? To run after him. Because she's already thought of all of the negative things that could happen. We can be driving and I can disturb my wife's ant bed. And she's got a dozen wrecks already going on down the road before we ever get there. Because that's the way her brain is wired. Okay? So, anybody here as a kid ever kick an ant bed? What happens when you kick an ant bed? There you go, crazy. If you kick your wife's ant bed, it will go crazy. Or if her ant bed gets kicked by somebody else. That's where all of these things that are going on happen. Now, I've learned that's the way she's wired, and you know what? It's actually kept me safe. Sometimes I thought I wouldn't have been safe. We were in London several years ago. I cannot get this car direction thing down. And every time I started to step off of the curb, I was looking this way, and she was grabbing me. She was stopping me. She was anticipating it before I could anticipate it. And many times she will catch something before I can catch it, because she's got these automatic thoughts that are going on here, and when those get disturbed, it takes a while for them to calm down. Just like the ant bed. As a kid, you go kick the ant bed, stirs them all up, stay away for a while, everything will calm back down, everything will get back into order. Okay. But if you keep kicking the ant bed, they don't calm down. And they can't figure out, they can't figure out themselves why they can't calm down. Okay, let's get to the men. First primary love need of a man is trust. Now, most people use the word here, respect. I use the word trust because I believe trust is more intimate than respect. In this sense of the word. If a man doesn't feel trusted, he can't feel loved. Now, this is essential to a man experiencing true love. To know and feel that he is trusted. Now, the first place the devil will attack a man is in his trustworthiness. First place the devil attacks a man is in his trustworthiness. You know, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I've taught this material in different forms, different ways, in prisons, homeless shelters. When I was pastoring, we had a residential homeless, not for homeless men, residential program for homeless men. I used to teach there, taught there every Monday night for about 5 years with these guys. CEOs, multi-million-dollar corporations. Here's an interesting thing that men always ask me. I don't care if it's the guy off the street or the CEO of the multi-million-dollar company. How do I get my wife to trust me? How do I get my girlfriend to trust me? How do I get my mother to trust me? It's very interesting to me. I've never had a man ask me, how do I get my father to trust me? Never had one ask me. It's always about the women in their life. Because that's where the enemy wants to drive the dagger. So, men need to feel trusted. When a woman's attitude is open and receptive toward her husband, he feels trusted. Now, I want to go a step further than what this part of this teaching goes and tell you this. When trust has been broken, it is not your wife's job to trust you. Now, I'm sitting in a prison room with a bunch of convicts, tough guys in there for about everything you could think of for being in prison. and they're asking me, how do I get my wife or my girlfriend to trust me? And I said to them, it's not their job. They all kind of rose up, leaned toward me like, got aggressive. I said, I'm sorry. It's not their job to trust you. It's your job to be trustworthy. That's an inside job, guys. We have to learn to be trustworthy. Now, here's how we become trustworthy. Now, if I'm doing it, whichever group of people I'm doing it with, I may do it different. But for guys on the street or guys that are broken, prison, and they're just broken, I would tell them, make a promise to yourself that you can keep in the next hour, the next 2 hours, the next 3 hours. Because making a promise that you can keep to yourself starts building trustworthiness. We often want other people to trust us because we don't trust ourselves. And we're looking for it externally. But if we start building internal trust, I had a couple I worked with a number of years ago that every time there was a pattern in their marriage that every so often the guy had an affair. She would forgive, he would have the affair, she would forgive, he'd promised never to do it again, and it was a pattern. It had been going on for several years. And so they came to me, and so he said, if she'll just trust me one more time. I said, stop it. Just stop it. You don't have the right, the history, to even ask it, and it's not her job. It's your job to be trustworthy. When you are trustworthy, she will trust you. A woman's intuition knows when a man is trustworthy. Never argue with a woman's intuition. Just say it. Okay. So, I said to him, I want you to make a promise to yourself, not to her. I want you to make a promise to yourself that you can keep. Where do you want to start? And here's where he started. He said, I promise to myself to be faithful to my wife today. Cool. So every day, he got up and he made that promise to himself, and then he made that declaration to her. He said, I promise to myself to be faithful to you. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm going to do myself. He did that for several months, day in and day out. And every day he would come home feeling so good. He had kept the promise that he made to himself. You'll feel better about the promise you make to yourself being kept than you will the promise you make to somebody else. See, if I make a promise to you, then I got an expectation of how I want you to tell me how I did. But if I make a promise to myself and keep it, then I'm going to feel good about me. And every day he got stronger and stronger and stronger. And one day she said to him, you don't have to tell me that anymore. I trust you. You are trustworthy. Now, that's a pretty cool thing, isn't it? Pretty cool thing. I was hired by a company here in Phoenix, multi-million-dollar company, whose COO, is that correct? The CPA of the company. The CPA of the company had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars. But they liked this guy, and they didn't think that was really his nature, and Christian people, and they just wanted to see if there's any way of salvaging him. So they asked me to step in, and I stepped in. I worked with him, and he was very remorse, stepped into a landmine, a trap, and we kind of worked through most of that, but I wasn't as much working through why he did it as to how he was going to go forward. So he made a promise. I'm going to be accountable every day to myself, and I'm going to be accountable to me, and I'm going to be accountable to the CEO of the company every day. And so we did that for several months until I told the CEO one day, I said, I don't think you need my services anymore. I think he's got it, and he's trustworthy. And that's been a few months ago now, and I know the CEO personally, and every time I see him, he gives me a thumbs up, and I know that means everything's going good with this guy. So he literally salvaged not only the person, but probably the family and everything else. Okay, I gotta move on. Men need to feel accepted. When a woman lovingly receives a man without trying to change him, he feels accepted. If you're treating your husband as a project, stop. If a man feels accepted, he will start working on himself. Now, I've seen this many times, where when we quit trying to change a man into, a woman quits trying to change a man into her image and starts accepting him where he is, he starts working to improve himself. See, when we are put in a defensive posture, whether it's a man or a woman, when we're put in a defensive posture, we're ready to hang on to what we have. When we're no longer having to be defensive, we're willing to move forward. In fact, there's some research out of the University of Stanford that has actually proven that you cannot have personal growth in a defensive posture. If you are defending a position, you cannot have personal growth and development. Okay, so learning to accept and demonstrating appreciation. Men want to know they're appreciated. They receive personal benefit. In fact, when a woman acknowledges having received personal benefit and value for a man's efforts, deposits are being made. I'm about to forget a little illustration here. Every time we do this, we're making a deposit into his emotional tank. The more his emotional tank is full, the more less defensive he becomes. Admiration. Admiration for the male is a counter need of the feminine need for devotion. Men need to feel like they are the knight in shining armor, the rescuer. I love it. My youngest daughter just turned 50. She was here with us a few days this past week while I was having a surgical procedure, and stayed with us. And she started telling me stories about her childhood. She loves doing that. And her favorite story has become one of my favorite stories. We lived in Oklahoma at that time, and we had tornadoes all the time. And during tornado season, our two girls had been with babysitters, and Sharon and I was at a church activity. So during the storm, the neighbors all went into the storm cellar. And so as soon as the storm had lightened up a bit, knew the girls would be worried, we went to the storm cellar. Now here's how I love the way my daughter describes it from her 8-year-old perspective, and I'm going to keep her perspective. She said, "Dad, when they opened that cellar door and you stood there in your trench coat you looked like you were 12 feet tall and you had come to rescue me. I said, yeah, that's me, babe. I don't want you to lose that memory. Because we guys want to know that we have made that kind of contribution, and that kind of contribution has been deposited into our emotional tank. And then, approval. Deep inside every man wants his wife, wants to be the hero. Again, the knight in shining armor. Funny story, all of us guys have been guilty of this. If you haven't been guilty of it, you're weird. So I'll just tell you that right up front. All of us guys want to fix something and then show our wife how we fixed it. Right? Come and see what I did. It's the 2-year-old and it's still looking for the approval. I did it. Let me show you what I did. I'm embarrassed to tell you this story. We lived in a house not too far from here that had a flat roof. And every time it rained, the roof leaked. Sharon kept saying, we need to get somebody out to fix that roof. I can do it. I can fix that roof. So I got up there, I got the materials, I got up there, climbed on the roof. I spread this stuff all over the roof. I had tar all over me, all over the roof, tracking it into the house. I had this stuff going on. And I had it fixed exactly the way I thought it was supposed to be fixed. But I couldn't turn it loose. I said, babe, you got to come and see it. She said, it's on the roof. I said, I know. I'll help you get up there. I made her crawl up on the roof to see the tar that I had spread on the roof. She said, yeah, that looks wonderful. You're marvelous. You're great. Thank you. Now help me get off of this roof. Now that was a great experience.
Until it rained.
Until it rained. And it still leaked. And we called her roofer. To get it fixed. But we have that built in. I've watched commercials. They even build commercials out of this stuff. Come and see what I did. Come and see what I fixed. We're looking for that. We have that need in our emotional tank to be filled. And when that gets filled, it makes a deposit into our emotional bucket. All right, number 6. This is extremely important. Encouragement. Primary love need of a man. The 6th, and still very important. When a woman needs reassurance, a man needs encouragement. Now, just saying that, I remember I didn't cover reassurance very well under the women. So I'm going to back up there and do that. Women need reassurance. That's why a woman needs to hear, loves to hear, that she's loved every day. That's back under the women need for reassurance. Women are more secure with a steady income than she is you taking a job making what is it? Commission. Thank you. My brain's disconnecting here. She's more secure with assurances than with something that's out there in the future. That gives her a sense of assurance. Men need encouragement. Let me say it again. Women need insurance about the present. Men need encouragement about the future. Finally got that out of my mouth. Okay. Women need assurance about the present. Men need encouragement about the future. So, behind every successful man is an encouraging woman. Encouraging him. Now, The more he gives her assurance in the present, the more encouragement she has to give him for the future. So you can see, I probably should have had one more bucket, but when we have two buckets that have bottoms in it, then you have two people that's able to make withdrawals from each other. Now, when you try to make a withdrawal from this bucket, it looks just like the other bucket. It looks like it ought to hold something, but if you try to make a withdrawal from it, you can't get anything out of it. You can be mad at this bucket. You can drop this bucket. You can kick this bucket. You can call that bucket names, but it still doesn't have anything in it. So it can't give you anything. So I don't care how you treat that bucket, it's not going to give you what you need. In fact, you're going to start getting what you don't want after a while, because the bucket's going to kick back. But when we make deposits, now let me say this very quickly, then we've got a very powerful video that we're going to show you. You got to be careful. You can put a lid on the bucket. You can put a lid on this bucket. Now, I'm going to use this the other way because I don't have a lid. But if this was the lid, obviously, doesn't matter how many things I try to put in it, it's not going to go in. Because you've got a lid on your bucket. Now, that lid can be a number of things. It can be unforgiveness. It can be an unhealed wound that won't allow you to let anything in. Bitterness. This is what we call a toxic marriage. Because we can't even get anything in the bucket. So we got to be able to take the lid off of the emotional bucket so that we can make deposits into the emotional bucket. Now, sometimes that's what we get into in counseling. Sometimes we discover what that is, and we have to be willing for it to be healed, willing to move forward. Now, we have a process in Life Impact on our marriage makeovers that we use a little differently. Instead of going backwards, we go forwards. And we create a marriage manifesto of what you want your future to look like. And then you get to decide which pool you want to draw from. Your history or your future. And if your history got you to need to see me, you probably don't want to draw from your history. You probably need to draw from your future. And we have a very powerful video that we're going to show you. And then Felicia's going to come and talk to you about some of the offerings that we have in Life Impact. Now, we're going to give you this video in its full presentation. This is a couple, I mentioned earlier, this is a couple that I worked with, started working with them about 2 years ago, and their marriage was over. They'd had several separations, 25 years of marriage, several separations. It was toxic to the hilt. She was done and had no intentions of ever going back into the marriage. And she'll tell you a little of the story of how she came to see me. She didn't come to me for marriage counseling, and I wasn't seeing her to get the marriage healed. I just know what happens when people get healed. Okay?
So, what that caused was for me to take a sabbatical from work and leave Colorado. So, first stop was Indiana to see my daughter and grandkids, and I